Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Arlene Diamco, the Multidimensional MD. Thank you so much for joining me today for episode 110 of the Multidimensional MD. I'm here to help you expand your perspective and to tap into your intuitive superpower so that you can access deeper healing. And today I want to talk about asthma because we're at the tail end of summer here, depending on where you live. But anyway, we are back to school. And around that time, and as the weather starts to change, then people start to have more asthma. Or if you're prone to asthma or breathing issues or a cough that has a hard time going away, then this is the episode for you. So, first of all, I'm going to go through what is asthma, what are the triggers, what are the standard of care, and then I want to broaden that and go through some integrative perspectives and multidimensional perspectives so that you can tap into integrative ways to approach the physical healing of asthma, the mental emotional aspects, and also the spiritual aspects. So we're going to go through that one by one. So first of all, what is asthma? Asthma is a condition in which the airways respond to certain triggers with a tightening of the airways or bronchoconstriction. So they squeeze. There's also inflammation in the airways and overall hyper-responsiveness. So they're just overreactive to things in general. And when you have asthma, it can feel like you're breathing through a straw. So if you have a nice open airway and then you narrow that with swelling, inflammation, and tightening of the muscles of the airways, then if you were to plug your nose and breathe through a straw, it just takes a lot more effort to do that. And after a while, you get tired and more short of breath, and depending on how tight those airways are. So the symptoms are characterized by a recurrent and reversible cough that is responsive to like certain kinds of like asthma medications. There's shortness of breath, and there's a tightening or pressure in their chest, or there can be. And oftentimes there's a wheezing or this whistling sound in the airways because as the airways narrow and the air is passing through them, then you can get like that whistling, wheezing sound. Although there are variants of asthma without wheezing. And it's diagnosed usually clinically. So that means based on symptoms, clinical symptoms. You can also see an allergy specialist or a pulmonologist, or maybe your regular physician as well, to do spirometry or peak flow measures. And that can also give you hints if you have asthma. So asthma is something that often develops in childhood, but it can get better. And then if it does, oftentimes what I see is that later in life, if you're feeling run down or if you have any certain illnesses, just a bit more vulnerable physically, then it tends to hit you again. So I'm to talk about asthma for all different ages. And so everything that we talk about here is going to apply. So what are some common triggers of asthma? It's great to keep a diary of your symptoms so then you can identify if you're having any certain triggers. So that can be any types of allergens. So outdoor allergens like pollens, mold, could be indoor allergens like dust or cockroaches, and it could be food allergens. So something to look into. Colds and viruses can also trigger asthmatic reactions. Irritants like strong smells or pollution in the air, secondhand smoke are common triggers. Some people are triggered by exercise, so just that demand of needing to breathe more can make the airways just, again, they're overreactive, so they tend to over-respond. Reflux can worsen, or spitting up in little ones can worsen asthma, and sensitivity to certain medications like asthma or sulfites can trigger asthma, and also emotional stressors and anxieties can trigger asthma, and we'll talk about that more in a bit. So before I go on to the integrative perspectives, I wanted to talk about the standard of care for asthma. And the management of asthma relies heavily on inhaled corticosteroids, to reduce inflammation, so that swelling in the airways, and also beta agonists, which help to relax the muscles in the airway. So remember, the muscles are tightening, and so it helps to relax. So those are things like albuterol inhalers or Zopanex. And there can be a combination of these medications, or sometimes they'll use other medications as well. But the standard of care usually focuses on medication and avoidance of triggers. But there is so much more we can do. So this talk is not going to focus on the medications because you can get that elsewhere. I want to talk about integrative approaches that you can do in addition to that. So I'm not telling anyone to stop their medications. Please don't do that, because the number one key to health is you need to keep breathing, right? So you want to be able to keep breathing, but you can also improve your health, and you can actually reduce your need for medications. Or I've seen in people be able to eliminate the need for medications altogether. But the goal is to keep you breathing. So if we have medications that can help you do that, be thankful for them. So what else can we do? There's so much. I'm going to talk about all these holistic physical approaches to asthma. And first, to understand that there is this allergic triad. So there's three things that tend to overlap and can go together. There's asthma, allergies, and eczema. So if you have any of those three things, then consider the things I'm talking about here today as well. So the first thing is to investigate allergies and sensitivities. And I am so surprised when people have anything on these allergic triads, have like allergic rhinitis, which is like seasonal allergies, or eczema or asthma, and have not had any kind of allergy or sensitivity investigation. Really should be part of standard of care, but sometimes the physicians will go straight to medication. So to you can use those, but to investigate. So much of the time, I see that allergies and food sensitivities are involved, and sometimes it's purely that. So I have seen people just allergic to dairy, or just really sensitive to dairy, or maybe they say that they're lactose intolerant, or they have people in the family that are lactose intolerant. So those are keys that, okay, dairy may be a problem for you. Other things that I see, common allergens, food allergies, would be gluten, egg, but it really depends on the individual. So if you haven't already, please investigate allergies and sensitivities. And you could start with a simple blood test to do that, to look at certain antibodies. You can go to the allergist, but they don't always look at the sensitivities. And so there's many different kinds of immune responses, and it's not just about the allergies, but also the sensitivities. And the sensitivities can be immediate reactions, but they can also be delayed reactions. So 12, 24, 72 hours later. Allergies, in terms of the medical definition of it, tend to be more immediate responses. So to look at that. The next thing in terms of physical approaches is to keep the diet more alkaline. And I did do another live stream on that, and I have a handout on the alkaline diet as well. Because if you have an alkaline diet, you will be reducing the burden of inflammation in the body. And you will also reduce your vulnerability to infectious illnesses, viruses, bacterial illnesses, which may be triggers for the asthma. So please take a look at that. It is really heavily focused on having a more veggie heavy diet. So 80% alkaline, that's going to be mostly vegetables, a 3-to-1 above ground to below ground. So less of the carby root veggies and more nice leafy greens. Healthy fruits can be a part of that alkaline diet, but not to overdo the sugars from the fruits. And then in the 20%, or the more acidic part of the diet, which you still need, would be the healthy sources of protein. So it would be fish, poultry, avoiding like red meat except for lamb. And then in that 20% are also grains, whole grains, and beans or sprouted beans would be better. and most nuts and seeds are in there. So that's overall 20%. But look at my other live stream, the alkaline diet, for more details on that. There is some studies on nutritional supplements for asthma, but the results are mixed, and I feel that it depends on the individual need for those nutritional supplements. So, and that's probably why the studies are mixed, because if you supplement everybody but not everyone needs it, then you're not going to see as much of the improvement or the benefit. So you could consider getting a nutritional profile, so a laboratory workup. I'll do that often. We could just do like a urine profile to get a glimpse of what sorts of nutrients you're deficient in. But to pay attention to if you're getting sources of good omega-3s in the diet, this will help to reduce overall inflammation and help to make the cell membranes much more fluid and less tight. So minerals, B vitamins, and antioxidants. And again, we can always look into more detail with that, with a nutritional profile. Um, some people in a pinch will use sources of caffeine as a mild bronchodilator, especially if you're out and don't have anything else. You could have like just a shot of coffee or something to help relax those muscles in the airways. But to keep in mind that caffeine also can exhaust adrenals, and your adrenals are needed to produce cortisol. And cortisol is a stress hormone, but it's also steroid, which helps to reduce inflammation in the body. So when your adrenals are tired, then your body will not be able to balance inflammation in the body as well. So that's another thing to look into. The adrenals sit right on top of the kidneys, and the kidneys are one of your detox organs. It helps to clean the blood. And I did a recent live stream on that, so you can look at that as well. But so the adrenals and the kidneys work together. They're a very close relationship. And the kidneys, they are one of your major detox organs, but your lungs are secondary detox organs for the kidneys. So if your kidneys are overwhelmed, then sometimes your lungs will take over trying to expel things that your body needs to get rid of. And if it can't do that adequately, then the lungs can get congested or inflamed. So, and including the airways. So, it's about balancing not just the lungs, but also all the different parts of the body, because everything needs to work in this integrated and balanced way. So looking at the adrenals, looking at the kidneys, looking at the balance of the overall immune system to better ward off viruses and colds and not overreact to potential allergens. If I am trying to strengthen the lungs in general, then I might look at certain kinds of adaptogens or lung tonics. And one that I will use, it's a very gentle one, it's called astragalus. It's not called for every person I see with asthma, but it's something to consider. And then when I take a look at the body overall, I feel that there's so much, people with asthma have a lot of tension in the body, and you need to loosen up that fascia and that connective tissue so that the rib cage and the lungs can move freely. And from an osteopathic perspective, often I see that the sacrum is a bit stuck. So that bone at the end of your spine, that really big bone, the sacropelvic area. So the sacrum actually needs to rock with the diaphragm breathing. And so when it's not, I find that people aren't able to clear the lungs as well. They're not able to move the lymph as well. And so it's really getting the whole breathing mechanism in your body working and flowing well. So it's not just the lungs, not just the diaphragm, but everything in your body has to breathe together. So looking into those different aspects, and we can help to improve that breathing function, like through cranial osteopathy, osteopathic treatment to help improve the flow. I want to go over a bit about like some Edgar Cayce information on asthma, about what's said in the Edgar Cayce readings. He is was a huge proponent of holistic health, and he was the most studied psychic of the 20th century, and he has over 30,000 readings on many of them on like health related topics. So there are many readings on people that have had asthma. So there are some generalities there. So I was just talking about osteopathic treatment, and Edgar Cayce did emphasize addressing certain things osteopathically in the body, in particular pressure in the upper thoracic and cervical spinal nerve plexi, so the bundles of nerves which supply the lungs and also regulate the blood flow to the lungs. So again, the health is in the flow. So the flow to and from the lungs needs to be balanced, and the nerve communication to and from the lungs needs to be balanced, and we can help address that through osteopathic treatment. And um, and I was talking earlier about like clogged lymph drainage. So the diaphragm, as it moves, if it's moving freely, then it can help to move the lymph drainage so that things don't get stuck and congested. It's like a backed up flow or backed up plumbing. So if something's blocking that lymph drainage, then it's going to back up and flood or create congestion in certain areas. So proper lymph flow is needed to help drain inflammation. And that can be done through a variety of ways, from lymph massage to movement, to going on a walk regularly, to lymph pumping exercises. And I taught a bunch of those in 2020 during the pandemic. And it really helped people to actually improve the drainage in their lungs so they could breathe better. So not for just asthma, but for any kind of um, congestion or breathing issues. Edgar Cayce also talked about poor elimination. So I talked about earlier about the lungs being secondary detox organs to the kidneys. So wanting to make sure that you're drinking enough water so that your urine runs a pale straw yellow, so that you are able to like move things, and the kidneys have enough fluid that it can filter to the blood effectively. The other major detox organs are the liver and the colon. So if you're constipated, then you'll be holding on to more toxins. You're not being able to eliminate those things in your body. So it's something else to address. And again, you don't have to do all of these things, because it's not that everyone is going to have every single one of these issues related to asthma, but these are things to look into. So if you haven't looked at these areas in the body, then to consider them and address them as needed. Edgar Cayce was also a huge proponent of the alkaline diet, and too many acid producing foods could be triggers for asthma. So, acid producing foods include excess sugar, processed carbs. So, again, to follow an alkaline diet, and avoiding environmental triggers or pollution, to need to get to fresh air and spend some time in like clean, fresh air and nature. Um, I like to think of that like mountain fresh air, not too thin if you have breathing problems, but it's just like so nice and clean. And Edgar Cayce also pointed at stress and anxiety as triggering asthma. So I'll talk more on that in a moment. Um, so before we go on to the mental emotional aspects, I want to talk about this girl from the Bronx that I saw when I was in residency. She had severe asthma, and she would be in the hospital over and over and over again. She would be back in the emergency room. We would have to hospitalize her. She would be wheezing so much. Her lungs would be so tight. And it's really interesting because at the time, we didn't know what else to do. We had maximized her on her medications, and we had done our best to show them how to avoid her triggers, but she kept coming back and her asthma was out of control. So this is kind of a sad point, but really important. What our team decided to do was refer the family to um, DFACS, or Department of Family Services, because they felt that the only reason she wasn't getting better was because the family wasn't giving her medications. that wasn't actually true. And in doing this, what happens, it really fractured our relationship, that hospital's relationship to the family. The mother was really sweet, very nice. The girl was really kind. And now, just talking about all the things that I just talked about, just even relating to the physical, there was so much more we could have done for her, but we didn't because we didn't know. So this is why I spend so much time talking and doing these live streams, because I want to help people expand their perspectives and see that there's so much more that we can do to access deeper healing. What I can still remember, because it was so obvious, when I put my hands on this girl's her chest, her back, when we we're listening to her lungs, her body was so tight. The muscles, the tissues were so tight. It was like, how could she actually breathe through that tightness? How could anything clear? And it wouldn't matter if she started feeling better or if the wheezing would improve, the tightness in her body would remain. And I can think of so many ways I could help her now, and wish I could have helped her then, but didn't know it. And this was while I was in my training in the Bronx, in the inner city. So surrounded by asthma specialists and all kinds of specialists, and yet we couldn't help her. And everything most of the things I just talked about, we didn't talk about at that point. So what else can we do in terms of the mental emotional aspects? So I've seen this so many times. Once I saw a girl in the emergency room, again in the Bronx when I was in my residency, and she was sent immediately to the asthma room because she was having asthma symptoms. She was short of breath and breathing fast, and she did have a history of asthma. But the interesting thing was, when I was talking to her more, she was really stressed. And I really felt that she was having a panic attack because we were giving her asthma medications, and it wasn't, it was helping, but not to the degree that you would think it would. So I just talked her through some deep breathing exercises. At that point in time, I had started doing some yoga and meditation and breath work, and that helped to calm her down so she was no longer feeling as short of breath. And so doing some breathing exercises or mindfulness work can really help people access their breathing so that they can calm it with their awareness. And when you're more calm, you're more relaxed. And when you're more relaxed, then the lymph can drain better and that inflammation can go down more easily. So it's they've done some studies on like mindfulness and meditation and how it can be helpful for illnesses like asthma. And there was one study on laughing, which was really interesting. It was laughing and allergies, because they found if people watched a video that made them laugh, that when they uh, injected them with something that was supposed to create like some sort of a little tiny hive or an allergic wheel, like when they do skin testing, that they were less likely to have that allergic response to the testing if they watched a video that made them laugh just prior to that. So I mean, how powerful is that? That laughing can help your immune system and help mediate allergic responses, and help to even like possibly like calm things like asthma. So we can expand how we are using our tools and really access deeper healing with them. Um, and yeah, and they also did studies that when if you believe that something was a trigger, that you were more likely to react to it. And that's even if they were using a placebo. So they would just spray a mist, just like a saline mist in the room that is not a known trigger for asthma. But if you believed it was, then you're more likely to start having like an asthma attack. So that's really interesting, like how much your belief can trigger asthmatic symptoms. So if you believe you could get better, if you could, if there was some way to shift the subconscious priming or the pattern of response, that emotional tie to the trigger, if there was some way to mediate that, then maybe we could calm more asthmatic reactions, just like we do with certain allergies. Like allergic reactions can also be emotional priming. So say you had an asthma attack and certain things were happening in your environment, then your body will record that in your subconscious. So maybe if certain things in your environment appeared again when you had the prior asthma attack, that you would be more likely to respond or react to those triggers again. So just an idea, and I've worked with this with people with various allergies or various emotional triggers, all different kinds of illnesses. But it's an idea of how to expand your perspective and look at asthma. Um, Asthma is also the organs of the lungs, and the lungs, if you look at the emotional ties or what the lungs tend to represent, it's fear and grief, and they're closely tied to the kidneys that often can represent fear and grief. It doesn't have to be like PTSD type of fear. It can be, everyone has a fear of something, and everyone has had some sort of grieving in their life, especially through this pandemic time, even grieving the way things used to be. So it's just to consider. It's not that it has to be something that is a huge part of your asthma or your loved ones, but something to consider. And are there unprocessed emotions of fear and grief that need to be addressed as you're ready to? And then I'm going to finish up with this last part of how spirit can relate to asthma. And this is something that my friend Maddie has told me before, with she's noticed, like when the kids are coughing or something's going on, um, that sometimes that you're picking up on emotions around you. So it's like putting static in your field. And this can feel sort of ungrounded, make you feel ungrounded. Or if you're not clear that this is happening, then you may not know even how to process it. So it shows up physically as this cough, like trying to get out. And metaphorically, if you think about how would you describe symptoms of asthma, it's like, I feel like I can't breathe, I can't catch my breath, or I can't speak if it's getting really bad. So to consider that the soul needs to feel that your soul can express itself into the world. You need to feel like you can express yourself into the world, and your soul needs to feel free in this expression. So even if it's moving through sadness or grief or moving through difficult emotions, if your soul feels like it can't express somehow, it can't get a word out, or it feels overwhelmed and can't catch a breath, maybe just needs some rest or quiet time. So it's really thinking about and feeling, how does this work for you? Like what does your soul need? What does your being need? Does it need more rest? Does it need some quiet? Does it need to grieve or go through sadness or let some tears out? This one boy I saw started having like more asthma exacerbations after his dog died. And so it's so easy to see that connection of grief and that need to get and process that grief out, not get it out, but more like process it and go through it and grow through it. So I know it's been a lot of information, and I could talk about this in so much more detail, but this is just something to spark your curiosity. And hopefully you can see asthma in a greater perspective, or expand your perspective in how you look at this illness, so that in understanding the illness, you can understand where the healing is. And that's always the most efficient path towards health, is if you can see the light in the illness, then to take steps towards that. So thank you so much for joining me. It's Dr. Arlene DeHamko, the Multidimensional MD. Please like and subscribe. If you have any questions on this, leave them in the comments. You can also find me on Instagram at All Worlds Health, on Facebook, All Worlds Health and Pediatrics. And you can sign up for my e-love letters. I send them out weekly. And you can do that at allworldshealth.com. Lots of love to you. I will see you next week at 11 a.m. Eastern Time.